From a single word that starts the hunt to an institution that turned blood into an experiment, this is Bloodborne's biggest mysteries explained: paleblood, the word that starts everything. Paleblood is Bloodborne's biggest mystery because it's the game's first real objective, and it never commits to what the word actually means. You're told to seek paleblood, and that phrase hangs over the entire hunt like a private joke you're not in on. NPCs reference it with certainty, but without clarity, and the world reacts to the idea of paleblood like it's a known thing, yet it's never cleanly defined in plain language. What makes it worse is how many places the word seems to fit. It could be a substance, something in the blood, something pale, something that changes people. It could be a state of being, a condition tied to insight, awakening, or the transformation of the hunt. It could be a specific presence, a force connected to the moon, the nightmare, or the thing behind the veil, or it could be a lie, a breadcrumb planted to pull you deeper, like the city itself wants you to chase a word until it becomes a door. Even the way the story unfolds feels like it's answering a question you haven't learned how to ask yet. The more you progress, the less paleblood feels like a medical term, and the more it feels like a cosmic password. This is why the paleblood mystery hits harder than a normal lore question. It's not a missing detail. It's the framing of your entire role. If paleblood is a thing, then your hunt is an investigation. If paleblood is a condition, then your hunt is a descent. And if paleblood is a presence, then your hunt is a confrontation with something the human mind wasn't built to recognize. And Bloodborne is careful about this. It doesn't hand you certainty because certainty would kill the tension. The game wants you to feel like you're chasing answers in a city that's already buried under secrets. So paleblood becomes a symbol of the whole experience. Your character starts with a simple goal, but the goal mutates as you learn what simple means in Yharnam. At some point, seek paleblood stops sounding like advice and starts sounding like a trap you agreed to. So if paleblood isn't a cure but a clue, then the real question becomes who's guiding the hunt and what's been looming over it the whole time. The moon presence, the contract you never remember signing. The moon presence is one of Bloodborne's biggest mysteries because it doesn't feel like a final boss. It feels like the thing that made the entire hunt possible in the first place. You spend most of the game hearing whispers about the moon, nightmares, great ones, and forces beyond comprehension, but the moon presence stays weirdly out of focus. It isn't talked about with the same direct fear as other entities. It's just there, hanging over everything like a silent agreement. Then you reach the end, and suddenly, the truth snaps into place. The hunter's dream isn't a comforting hub. It's a mechanism, a place that resurrects you, resets you, keeps you moving, and keeps the hunt going. Gehrman's situation makes it worse. He isn't just tired, he's trapped. His tone isn't mentor, it's prisoner who wants you to replace him. And when the moment comes, the choice you're offered doesn't feel like heroism. It feels like paperwork. Submit and you wake up free but ignorant. Refuse and you fight and something else steps in. That something else is the moon presence, appearing not like a beast that wandered in, but like the owner returning to check on its property. This mystery matters because it reframes the hunt as less of a crusade and more of a contractual loop. The dream gives you power and persistence, but it also keeps you under control. You can't permanently die while bound to it, but you also can't truly leave on your own terms. That's what makes the moon presence unsettling. It doesn't need to chase you. It doesn't need to threaten you loudly. It already has leverage. It also raises the question Bloodborne never answers cleanly. Who benefits from the hunt continuing? Because the dream isn't built for your comfort. It's built for your utility. You're a tool that gets sharper over time, sent out night after night to clean up a mess that never fully disappears. The city keeps rotting, beasts keep appearing, nightmares keep deepening, and you keep waking up again. So the moon presence stops feeling like a boss and starts feeling like the hand turning the crank. And if that's true, then the most unsettling possibility is that the hunt isn't happening because you chose it. It's happening because you're needed. And if the dream is less a refuge and more a leash, then the next mystery is the thing that tightens it, because it changes what you can see, what you can understand, and what the world is allowed to show you. Insight, the stat that turns reality inside out. Insight isn't a stat in the normal RPG sense. It's a dial that decides how much of the world you're allowed to perceive. At first, insight feels harmless. You gain it from encountering bosses, consuming certain items, and pushing deeper into the hunt. It sits in your HUD like any other currency, quiet, almost innocent. Then the world starts changing. With higher insight, things you swore weren't there suddenly become visible. Details in the environment feel wrong in a way you can't unsee. The atmosphere shifts from plague city to something more cosmic and predatory. Like Yharnam was never the real setting, just the surface layer. Even your enemies don't always feel the same. Some encounters become more stressful not because you leveled wrong, but because the game starts treating you like someone who knows too much. And once you've seen certain things, you can't go back to the earlier, simpler version of the world, because Bloodborne doesn't let you unknow knowledge. This is why insight is so unsettling. It turns progression into a trade. Most RPGs reward you for learning. Bloodborne does too, but it adds a catch. Awareness has consequences. Insight makes you stronger in some ways, but it also makes you more exposed. The higher it climbs, the more the game leans into the idea that understanding and safety are opposites. It also reframes the entire hunt as something psychological. You aren't only fighting beasts, you're fighting the limits of perception. How much truth a human can witness before the world stops looking human. Insight isn't a buff or debuff in the normal sense. It's a door you keep opening, and every door makes the next one harder to close. So when the game gives you insight, it isn't just handing you progress, it's asking whether you're prepared to live with what comes with it. Insight doesn't just reveal the nightmare, it tempts you to touch it. And the next mystery is what happens when that temptation becomes a religion. Byrgenwerth, when curiosity turned into a crime. Byrgenwerth isn't frightening because it failed, it's frightening because it worked, and the people involved still couldn't handle what they uncovered. Everything traces back to Byrgenwerth like it's the original contamination site of the entire story. It's not a grand cathedral or a kingdom, just a quiet academic place that feels almost too small to be responsible for so much damage, which is exactly what makes it unsettling. This is where the obsession with eyes begins. Not metaphorically, literally. The scholars here weren't satisfied with studying old blood or ancient ruins. They wanted a new method of understanding reality itself, and they treated the human body like the easiest tool to modify. And then there's the lake. Byrgenwerth is tied to the discovery that the world you experience isn't the full world. There's a veil, something hiding the true shape of things. The lake becomes this symbolic boundary line between what humans can process and what they can't, and the moment that boundary gets involved, everything starts spiraling. Even Master Willem's philosophy, we require more eyes, lands differently once you realize he isn't talking about enlightenment the way normal people mean it. He's talking about evolution through insight and alteration, an academic justification for tampering with the mind until it can see what it was never built to see. Byrgenwerth matters because it reframes Bloodborne's horror as a human decision, not a cosmic accident. The great ones are alien. Sure, but Byrgenwerth is where human ambition becomes the delivery system. This is the moment the story stops being something is happening to Yharnam and becomes someone did this on purpose. And that's what makes it feel like a crime scene. The scholars didn't just stumble into forbidden truth. They pursued it with structure, methods, institutions, and students. They made it organized, repeatable, like a research program you can fund, expand, and rationalize. Because once you label horror as progress, it becomes easier to justify. One more experiment, one more ritual, one more necessary sacrifice. And the scariest part is that they weren't trying to summon evil, they were trying to understand. Byrgenwerth shows that in Bloodborne, knowledge isn't power, it's a door. And once a door is opened, curiosity stops being a virtue and starts being a liability. Byrgenwerth cracked the lock, but the next mystery is the thing they found on the other side, a presence so passive and so unreadable that the world had to be bent just to keep it asleep. Rom, the vacuous spider, the veil holding the world together. Rom is unsettling because it isn't a monster guarding treasure, it's a living filter, and killing it doesn't unlock progress. It removes the last layer of mercy between you and the truth. Before Rom, Yharnam is already terrifying, but it still feels like a plague story. Beasts, blood, madness. A city collapsing from the inside. Then you reach the lake. Rom doesn't behave like a cunning villain. It doesn't taunt you, chase you, or speak through servants. It just exists. Blank, heavy, almost inert, surrounded by little spider things that defend it like the world depends on it. And in a way, it does. The moment Rom dies, reality changes. The sky doesn't just get moodier. The rules shift. What was hidden becomes visible. The illusion of normalcy snaps, and the blood moon hangs over the city like a verdict. Things that felt like rumor turn into architecture, when the hunt stops feeling like a bad night and starts feeling like an apocalypse you've been walking through the whole time. Rom's death isn't a victory fanfare. It's a curtain drop. Rom matters because it reframes the entire story as controlled exposure. Byrgenwerth didn't just discover something, someone or something decided the truth needed to be contained. Rom functions like a seal on the mind of the world, preventing full contact between humanity and what's really pressing against it. That's why Rom feels vacuous. It isn't evil. It isn't even fully present in a way we can understand. It's more like a mechanism wearing a body, a soft, living plug shoved into a hole that should never be open. And here's the darker implication. If Rom is a veil, then the world you experienced before wasn't normal. It was curated, a version of Yharnam you could endure. So, when you kill Rom, you aren't removing a threat. You're removing a protection you didn't realize you had. The horror escalates not because you failed, but because you finally succeeded. And that's the cruel genius of it. Bloodborne lets you feel smart for pushing forward, and then punishes you by letting you see more than you can comfortably carry. Because now, the sky agrees with what the insight system was hinting at the whole time. With the veil gone, the next mystery isn't what's hiding anymore. It's who's pulling the strings in plain sight, and why the red moon always shows up when something is about to be born. The blood moon, a sky that means something is coming. The blood moon isn't just a spooky lighting change. It's the moment Bloodborne stops feeling like a city in crisis, and starts feeling like the city is being prepared for something. Once the blood moon rises, the game's tone doesn't simply get darker. The entire logic of what's happening sharpens into something more deliberate. Before this moment, you can still tell yourself a comforting story. A plague, a bad ritual, a town that went too far with blood healing. And now everything's collapsing. After the blood moon, that story doesn't hold, because the moon doesn't arrive like weather. It arrives like a switch being flipped. The sky turns red and stays that way, like a seal has been broken. People who were barely clinging to sanity don't just worsen, they unravel, as if something external is pressing on the mind. The world begins to feel less like random madness, and more like an escalating event with stages, one you're arriving to at exactly the wrong time. The phrasing around it matters too. The game treats the blood moon like an omen with a job. It isn't a weird moon, it's a sign that the boundary is thinning, that the night is reaching its climax, that something is pushing through the cracks. And the most telling detail of all, it doesn't fully manifest until the veil is removed. That timing makes it feel procedural, like the blood moon was always there, just not allowed to be seen yet. What the blood moon really does, beneath the spectacle, is change what reality will tolerate. In Bloodborne, the biggest danger isn't the beasts, it's contact. The closer humanity gets to the truth behind the hunt, the less stable normal becomes. That the blood moon is the visual announcement of that instability. The moment the world stops pretending it's just sickness and admits it's something cosmic. That's why it feels ritualistic. A ritual isn't chaos. A ritual is repetition with purpose. The blood moon reads like the final phase of something that's been building quietly, whether anyone in Yharnam understood it or not. Under that sky, the hunt stops being a consequence and starts resembling an offering. And here's the uncomfortable layer. The blood moon doesn't feel like it's happening to the city. It feels like it's happening through the city. Like the streets, the bodies, the fear, the blood, all of it is being used as material for something bigger than survival. The red light isn't just ominous, it's evaluative. It makes you feel watched, measured, like the night has a purpose and you're inside the machinery of it. That's why the blood moon hits so hard as a mystery. It suggests the hunt is not only a disaster, but a process, and processes have end goals. So when the sky turns, it's not saying things are bad, it's saying the next step has begun. And if the blood moon is the signal that the world is ready, then the next mystery is the people who tried to trigger that signal on purpose, the ones who treated the end of the night like a delivery date. The School of Mensis, the ritual that didn't summon help, it summoned attention. The School of Mensis is terrifying because they weren't trying to study the nightmare. They tried to force a response from something above them, like the cosmos was a door you could kick in. Mensis doesn't feel like a normal faction with a normal goal. Their work is obsessive, structured, and surgical, more like an operation than a cult. They didn't wait for revelation to happen naturally. They built a ritual around the idea that if they pushed hard enough, the universe would have to answer. And the result wasn't enlightenment. It was the nightmare of Mensis, a place that feels less like a realm and more like the aftermath of a failed experiment. The environment itself reads like evidence. Warped geometry, hostile rules, and a sense that the human mind wasn't meant to exist there for long. Everything screams that someone reached too far, and reality pushed back. The most unsettling part is how the blood moon suddenly makes sense in this context. The red sky doesn't feel like random escalation anymore. It feels like the ritual finally connected, like Mensis didn't cause the nightmare so much as they succeeded in getting noticed, and then couldn't handle what noticing meant. Mensis matters because it reframes Bloodborne's horror as an intentional act of escalation. This isn't a plague that spiraled out of control. This is a group that looked at a thin boundary and decided to tear it open wider. They treated communion like a transaction. Offer enough suffering, stack enough insight, perform the right steps, and something will arrive. But the nightmare they ended up with doesn't feel like a reward. It feels like the cost of making contact without consent. That's why Mensis is such a huge mystery. Were they calling for a great one to come down, or were they trying to climb up? Either way, the outcome is the same. Humanity wasn't upgraded, It was overwritten. Their ritual didn't lift them out of the world, it dragged the world closer to whatever they touched. And once the blood moon is up, the implication gets sharper. This signal wasn't meant for humans. It's a beacon for things that don't live on your scale of mercy. Mensis proved the sky can be forced to answer, but the next mystery is what happens when the answer isn't a voice or a vision. When it's a birth and the city becomes the cradle. Mergo, the cry you hear but never see. Mergo is one of Bloodborne's most disturbing mysteries because the most powerful presence in the nightmare isn't a monster you can fight, it's an infant you can't even properly understand. You hear Mergo long before you meet Mergo. Baby's cry follows you through the nightmare of Mensis, like a signal you can't turn off. Not loud, not dramatic, just persistent enough to feel wrong. It doesn't sound like ambience, it sounds like the environment is reacting to something real. And yet, Mergo is never presented like a normal character. There's no clear body, no clean reveal. What you're dealing with feels more like the idea of a child than a child itself, an existence that's partially here, partially elsewhere, and fully capable of shaping the nightmare around it. Then there's Mergo's wet nurse, an entity that appears like a protective reflex made physical. It doesn't behave like a random boss guarding a room for gameplay reasons. It behaves like something that exists because Mergo exists, like the nightmare generated its own defense system. Oh, and the strangest detail is the outcome. When you succeed, it doesn't feel like you killed something. The crying stops, like a channel got closed, like an influence got cut off. The silence afterward feels heavier than victory. Mergo matters because it reframes power in Bloodborne. In most stories, power is something an adult wields, a king, a god, a monster. In Bloodborne, the most dangerous thing in the nightmare is a child, something small, helpless, and completely incompatible with the human world. That incompatibility is the horror. Mergo's existence suggests the nightmare isn't only a place of punishment, it's a womb-like space where something is being protected, sustained, and kept out of reach. And if Mensis was trying to force contact, Mergo might be what they successfully latched onto. Not a teacher, not a savior, but a being whose very existence bends reality. The cries aren't just sadness, they're consequence. They're the audible proof that the boundary between humans and great ones isn't philosophical, it's biological. When that boundary gets crossed, you don't get enlightenment, you get a birth that doesn't belong in your world. And that's why Mergo is so uncomfortable to resolve. You aren't defeating evil. You're interrupting something ancient, cosmic, and maternal, something that was never meant to involve you at all. And once you've heard what the nightmare protects, the next mystery is the force that keeps reshaping the hunt from the start, because Yharnam's blood wasn't just medicine. It was an invitation, the old blood, the cure that behaves like a calling. The old blood isn't mysterious because it causes beasts. It's mysterious because it feels like it's doing something else at the same time, something intentional, like it's recruiting. Yharnam treats blood the way other cities treat medicine. Routine, trusted, almost sacred. Blood ministration isn't a back alley practice. It's a foundation of daily life. People line up for it. They speak about it with faith. The healing church builds an entire social order around it, and the city rewards that devotion with the only thing it values more than truth, relief. But the effects don't behave like a normal plague. Yes, blood can heal, but it also changes people in ways that feel targeted rather than random. The transformation into beasts isn't just sickness, it's distortion, and it spreads through obsession, dependency, and ritual use. Yeah, the more the city clings to blood, the more the city becomes something that looks less human. Then you start noticing the escalation pattern. Blood isn't merely consumed. It's administered like a rite. The church doesn't just distribute it, it controls it. The hunters don't simply respond to outbreaks. They operate like a built-in cleanup crew for consequences the city keeps choosing. And the further you go, the more it feels like the old blood does two things at once. Heals the body while thinning the barrier between human life and something beyond it. Slowly, persistently, like a door being pushed open one patient at a time. This mystery matters because it reframes the entire tragedy of Yharnam. If the old blood were simply poison, the story would be straightforward. Bad medicine, bad outcome. But Bloodborne keeps hinting that blood is also communication, that it isn't only changing bodies, it's tuning them, like a frequency you weren't meant to hear being pumped into your veins until your mind starts recognizing signals it used to ignore. That's why the beast plague feels like only one layer of the problem. Beasthood is what happens when humans try to use an alien gift, like it's a commodity. It's the immediate consequence. The deeper consequence is stranger. The old blood makes the city compatible with the cosmic. And once compatibility enters the story, the old blood stops feeling like a cure gone wrong and starts feeling like an invitation that never stops being accepted. Every transfusion becomes a vote for the same outcome. Every miracle becomes another step toward a world where humans can't remain human. The most uncomfortable thought is the simplest one. Maybe the old blood didn't ruin Yharnam by accident. Maybe Yharnam kept saying yes, and the old blood simply answered. And if the blood was the invitation, then the next mystery is the institution that mailed it out at scale. Because the Healing Church didn't just treat patients. It engineered a citywide experiment. The Healing Church, a citywide experiment wearing a halo. The Healing Church is such a huge mystery because it doesn't behave like a religion that found a miracle. It behaves like an institution that scaled one. The church didn't just offer blood ministration as a service, it made it a system. A hierarchy, a culture. People in Yharnam don't talk about blood like it's medicine. They talk about it like it's salvation. And that mindset didn't appear naturally. It was taught, and reinforced, and normalized until refusal looked irrational. And the church's solutions always come with expansion baked in. More blood, more patience, more dependence, more hunters, more secrecy, more cleanup, more experiments, more facilities, more locked doors. Everything points to organization, not accident. When outbreaks happen, the response isn't surprise, it's procedure. Like the church always expected consequences, and had staff on standby to manage them. Even the way the hunt functions starts to read like infrastructure. The church can condemn the beasts while still benefiting from the blood economy that creates them. Because the hunt isn't a failure of the system, it's part of how the system keeps running. And this is what makes the Healing Church such an interesting mystery. It turns the horror from what is happening into who designed a world where this could keep happening. A plague is scary because it spreads. The church is scarier because it administrates the spread, controlling access, shaping belief, and deciding what gets called a miracle versus what gets buried as necessary sacrifice. And once you see that, the entire story shifts. The old blood stops being a tragic discovery and starts looking like a product. The hunters stop being heroes and start looking like maintenance workers. Yharnam stops being a doomed city and becomes a test environment. Not because everyone in the church was evil and with malicious intent, but because institutions don't need malice to become monstrous. They just need momentum, incentives, and a population desperate enough to accept anything that promises relief. The church offered relief, and then built an empire on the side effects. So the real question isn't whether Yharnam could have been saved, it's whether it was ever meant to be. If you enjoyed learning about the biggest mysteries of Bloodborne and want to see more, make sure you subscribe and click on the video on screen now to see more.